Hey, so happy Halloween, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for what's called the investor interview. Over the next half hour or so, we're going to be discussing some very important things that homeowners and potential people who want to sell their home should keep in mind if they are considering selling their home to an investor. This is not to say that you should not work with an investor or that you should. This is just to make sure that sellers understand what they're getting themselves into when working with an investor if they don't have any representation from a realtor or broker or other professional. So to help me with this interview today, I have Evan Elsea here. He is the president of Investments One, which is a company that purchases homes across Southeast Michigan for the purpose of fixing them up and reselling them, which is also known as fix and flips. They make competitive offers to sellers of single-family homes in Oakland, Macomb, Wayne, Washtenaw, and Livingston counties. Their consumer-facing product is called HouseHop, which can be found on househop.com. This allows homeowners and realtors direct access to a cash buyer. And if you don't know the incentive to having a cash buyer, it's really to get you it gets you a very quick closing. So you don't have the time constraints that you would have when someone's purchasing a home with a mortgage. They have been operating for about 10 years, but launched House Hop about 5 years ago and have purchased hundreds of homes during this time, mostly with the help of Real Estate One family agents, which includes the brokerage that I'm with, which is Maxbrook Realtors. So thank you, Ed, for being here. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Patrice. Happy Halloween.
Thank you. Happy.
Neither of us are wearing costumes, but maybe next time.
Yeah, I thought about that, but I thought I would look like a joke, so I just changed my mind. Um, so investing isn't anything new, but I think the average homeowner has a big misconception of what it means when an investor is going to purchase their home. And I think a part of that is because they're thinking the investor has a ton of money, and so they're willing to spend whatever on the property, whether that's what it's worth or a lot more than what it's worth or what the market will bear for the property, as people would say. Um, and so they think that investors looking to also make it very simple and easy for them, which it can be. Um, but I think what most homeowners need to understand is that investors are looking to make a profit on the property they're purchasing, otherwise they have no desire for it, which usually means investor does need to purchase the property for a lot less than what the home is worth. Is that correct?
So, there is, absolutely a space for real estate investors in the real estate ecosystem. And in many cases, a homeowner selling to an investor, just means that the buyer for their home, it happens to be an investor. And if they're able to, fix the property up or whatever the case may be, and turn a profit, by either reselling it or maybe keeping it as a rental, that's generally a good thing for real estate, and it does offer a different option to sellers, to homeowners. Um, the situations where a investor would be purchasing the home at a price that is well below market value would most cases be if like the home was really move-in ready, was a nice livable home that didn't require a lot of work. And that's a situation where it's almost always in the best interest of the seller, if their situation allows for it, to list the home with, a realtor like Patrice and open it up to the forces of supply and demand and get the most amount of eyeballs on the property as possible. Every once in a while, there's a situation where that just doesn't work for the seller or the family of the seller, or the urgency required for the sale. And sometimes that's where, there's a new business model over the last, 5 or so years called iBuyers, which I think we're going to talk about later in this, but that's kind of where they come into play in the ecosystem.
Okay. Thank you. So homeowners also get a lot of calls time to time and direct mail, which is, postcards or letters indicating that an investor or someone's looking to purchase their home, and they may say they're looking to purchase it all cash. There's not going to be any commission because there's no realtor involved, and they also are willing to pay most of the closing costs, which leads to the homeowners believe that their home is worth a lot more because they think it's in high demand because everyone's calling and sending them letters. But I think what they may not understand is that really the investor is really prospecting, right? Which is trying to find someone that wants to sell their home to them so they can possibly make a profit off of that home, but they haven't seen that home. They don't know the condition. They don't know how much you want to spend on the home. They're trying to figure out, okay, who wants to sell their property and can I make this a deal for me? Would you say that's pretty much the case?
Yeah, I'm sure we all get letters, no matter where you live or what kind of home you're in or what the price point. I think almost everybody can say they get letters from letters, text messages, phone calls from people marketing their services or which is in that case to try to purchase their home. And sometimes those are the actual cash buyers, and sometimes they are, what we call wholesalers or non-licensed, they're not a realtor, but they're an intermediary that is going to essentially sell the contract to an end buyer, which is kind of a complicated concept if you've never heard of a wholesaler before. But yeah, there's more and more marketing dollars being spent by people getting into real estate. There's a lot of buzz on social media and TV shows about real estate investing. It's a very, popular topic, conversationally, whether you're in the real estate field or you're not at all. So yeah, we'll I'm sure continue to see more and more of that.
Yeah, because the other point too for me is that it also leads to, so I think they're going to save a ton of money because they're thinking, well, I'll sell the property, I don't have to pay for these expenses as far as commission and closing costs go. So therefore I should get more money. And that sounds great and everything, but I think a lot of times they fail to realize that if they're going to offer a lot less than what it's worth or not what they may get for the property if they list it for sale, because it's a seller's market still and has been for many years now, um, then they aren't factoring into the fact that actually with those expenses, they could actually still get a lot more money. For example, let's say if they list their home with a realtor where they're selling it for 500,000. So even with commissions and any closing costs or other things that they have to pay for, and given there's no mortgage, they could net, which is what they walk away with, from the closing table with about $468,000. But then let's say the investor says, well, I'll buy the property for 400,000. In order for it to make sense to them, that's the top of where they could buy the property for without paying commissions and closing costs. Um, that would actually net the seller 390,000, given there's no mortgage as well. So I think, not paying commission and closing costs sounds great, but if you're gonna make a lot less money, then it, kind of defeats the purpose. Um, so even with all of this, there are circumstances where it can make sense to sell the home to the average investor instead of putting the home on the market, which I think you said a little bit about as well. Um, and I think a lot of that too could also factor in considering the timeline of needing to sell, the condition, or any other concerns. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I would advise homeowners that are thinking about selling to really try to avoid, no matter what their situation is if they're strongly considering or entertaining an offer from an investor, it really um, it really would benefit the seller to try to get at least two, three, four offers. This is, of course, where the value and benefit of a realtor comes into play. But what you want to try to avoid is getting an offer from one investor or wholesaler, cash buyer, and just saying, all right, I think this seems like enough for me. I'm going to accept it. That more often than not is where uh, sellers can leave more and more money on the table. And that's what you want to try to avoid. So even just getting like two or three offers, if you know that, putting your home on the market with a realtor just doesn't work for you, either due to the timing, the condition of the home, your family, life situation, urgency of it, it's better to at least try to get a few offers, because the more competition, which is why putting a property on the MLS, we believe is the best way for a seller to maximize the value, the proceeds of their property. But competition is good. It's like anything else, especially when you're dealing with, in some cases, the largest purchase or, investment in somebody's, life is you want to get a second opinion, just like if you were car shopping.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point too, because I've had some where, they seem to be adamant that it was going to be best to have the investor, even though he told me the home didn't need any work. And I said, well, at least I could do is, you tell me what they're willing to buy the home for, and I can run the numbers to tell you how much you could sell the home for on the market and paying the fees and see what the difference is going to be. And then I get some people where there's nothing really wrong with the home, or sometimes there is something wrong with the home, but they're getting people just reaching out to them that really do want to buy it. They're looking at it. And I'm like, well, if that's what you're getting with not being on the market, and madam, what you could get if you actually
Mhm.
listed the property for sale.
Exactly.
But yeah, of course, if they have to sell the home really, really fast, they have a time constraint and other factors, then yeah, makes sense. So you talked briefly about iBuyers, but I think over the last several years, that's, there was a big discussion about iBuyers, which in my mind, I'm not sure if this is right. I would think that it's like a fancy way of saying investment buyer that's a larger company than the average investor. Is that pretty much it?
Yeah, I'd say they're like an institutional buyer. I think the biggest difference is iBuyers, are marketing direct to the consumer. They're trying to, use technology and, basically their website to make it really, really easy for a homeowner to solicit an offer for their property. The one big difference between an investor that buys a lot of homes, or fix and flips, is that iBuyers will purchase homes that are basically move-in ready, newer homes, cookie cutter type of properties, and they can make really competitive offers. Where I think it can be a little bit frustrating for the seller is they'll make these offers without viewing the property. Whereas if an investor made an offer, or if House Hop came out to make an offer, we would do that after touring the home. And so it can be, I think, a little bit of a bait and switch sometimes, because then they'll follow up that offer with their actual, property inspection. And then a lot of times they will revise their offer price, sometimes significantly, based on the condition of the home and or what they find out about major structures and things like that.
Yeah, I even think that a lot of, wholesalers do that as well. They try to wholesale property without seeing it, but yeah, they'll do that as a way to get, into the property, or as a way to see how motivated they are, and then switch it later once they've got under contract with them. So okay. So I guess you're indicating that House Hop Investments One wouldn't necessarily fall under this category because you do see the property, or would you say you are in the
Yeah,
category?
so we typically don't purchase homes that are move-in ready and there's no deferred maintenance and they're not older properties that need a lot of work. Every once in a while we do. I try to tell every seller or realtor that's referring the property to us that we really always encourage the seller, if they can, to list their home on the market with a realtor. And that's the only way for them to be certain that they're selling their home for the maximum amount of money. It's a it's a proven model. If they don't want to do that, we feel like we have an option for them that we provide a competitive offer. We don't really try to use tactics like make really lowball offers and sometimes we will ultimately pass on making an offer on the property if we just feel like it really wouldn't benefit us or benefit the seller to do the deal. So the big difference between us and the iBuyer model is that, yeah, we are viewing the property before making that offer. We do get most of our referrals from our Real Estate One family of company agents, whether it's Real Estate One, Max Brook, Reinhardt, and others. And so whereas the iBuyer, they're typically trying to sort of cut the realtor out of the transaction as much as possible, even though they do understand the importance of the realtor and they do work with realtors in some capacities, but we're very, pro realtor, whereas, they are operating on such thin margins that they're looking to keep those transfer costs as low as possible when they sell, which usually includes not having to pay realtors as much as possible. That was probably kind of confusing, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the other thing too. I think people should keep in mind is that just because you list the home on the market doesn't mean an investor won't buy the property. You may get a lot of investors say, I like to buy off market, but that's because they have a bigger chance of no competition and possibly getting a better deal on that property in most cases. Versus if it's on the market and all investors, if your property is attractive to investors, you will still get investors. And if you do decide to, sell directly with an investor, it would be really beneficial to still have a realtor involved in the transaction. Usually the commission will not be anywhere near how much it would be to list the property, but then you would also have that representation to make sure you're getting treated fairly and you know what's going on in the transaction, not frustrated.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, if you look at on the MLS, plenty of investors that are either doing their very first deal, or they're doing 2 to 3 deals a year, or they're doing dozens, if not hundreds, of deals a year. They purchase on on the MLS, and that tells you that, well, did that property sell for below market value when you had like 4 to 6 good cash offers over list price? Like, no, it was just the best buyer for that property happened to be somebody that was not going to, live there, that they were going to probably go in there and fix it up and either resell it or rent it out.
Yeah, because most people looking to purchase a home to live in, they don't want to do that much work. And so at some point it becomes too much work and therefore an investor is best, right? Or it's a tenant in the property that's paying rent, so they're not going to live there. So only investor can really buy that. So yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so wait, let me see if I missed anything here. No, we already talked about that. Okay. Given how much work a property needs and the ARV on the home, which is after repair value, which what the home is worth after the investor has fixed up the property. In some cases, the seller can sell the property to an investor for what the home is worth, and the investor still make a good profit. I think you talked about um, if they're buying and holding, meaning that they're going to buy and have a tenant in there that's paying them rent. But in the scenario, let's say it is a fix and flip. Um, I mean, are you seeing some instances where even if you bought it where it's worth, you still can make a big profit because there's so much work to be done, or what do you
Yeah,
think?
absolutely. Especially when uh, multiple buyers or investors are competing to purchase the same property, and it kind of bids up a little bit in value. And they're mostly doing that. Probably all of those offers for certain properties are individuals that are not going to live in the home. They're doing it for business purposes of generating income by fixing it up and reselling it. So there's absolutely a place for that. Um, I think the idea that investors will always buy a property for 20 to 40% below market value, I don't think you see that as much as maybe the general public would believe is the case. Sure, are there instances where people will kind of, for lack of a better term, take advantage of a um, uneducated seller or somebody that's inexperienced or doesn't know what their property's worth? Yeah, that absolutely happens. But most of the time, these properties are selling for market value or near that.
Okay. Um, so a lot of calls and mail and text messages, I forgot about that part too. The homeowners get asking to purchase their home are from wholesalers and not what we're called end buyers, meaning the person that's going to purchase the property at the end of the day. They're indicating to buy the
Mhm.
home, but they really aren't. And I think you said a little bit about wholesalers, but can you talk more about wholesalers?
Uh, yeah, so wholesalers basically like you hear the commercials on the radio or on TV, we buy homes cash. Those are almost all wholesalers. Those companies or individuals, they may occasionally actually buy the home, but most of the time they are not purchasing the properties. They are getting the property under contract with the seller. So they have a purchase agreement. And in that purchase agreement, there's an assignment clause that allows that buyer to assign that contract to a different entity. So it's kind of like they're a realtor, but they're not a realtor. They're not listing the property on the MLS typically, and they're looking to take, let's say they're under contract with the seller for 150,000, and then they're going to market that contract, that property, to their whole database and network of cash buyers, and they might try to sell it for close to 200,000 and make, you know, 30 to $40,000 spread, or what's called an assignment fee. Um, there's a place for this in the real estate market. Not all wholesalers are bad. Most of them are good. It doesn't usually benefit the seller because that seller, could work with a really good realtor that could bring them investors or cash buyers or market their home in a way to solicit multiple offers. And they wouldn't have to give up that much equity in their home. Now, wholesalers don't always make 50,000 on assignment fees. They could make 1 to 2,000, or they could make 100,000 on really big deals. So it does vary. And we're not trying to put wholesalers out of business, but going back to your original question, most of the advertising for and marketing for cash offers on your home, those are coming from wholesalers, which are kind of intermediary brokers to the real estate transaction.
Yeah, because I mean, there are definitely some wholesalers who tell the seller something about what they intend to do. The seller still
Mhm.
may not fully understand, what's going on, but
Yeah, I
it,
think some of them are more transparent than others about the process and what that assignment clause means. And most of them will essentially have like a group showing where they'll try to get as many investors through at one time, which is really no different than a realtor having an open house, if you think about it. It's just, yeah. So as long as they're transparent about it, and I guess if you're a homeowner and you're thinking about selling your property to somebody like this, the questions to ask would be, make sure you read the contract. It's always good to have an attorney involved if you can, or a realtor, um, and ask questions about the process and the assignment feature and who are you marketing this property to, the term of it, what happens if they're not able to find somebody to assign the property to? Are they going to buy it or are they just going to back out? So these are all things to think about when if you're entertaining one of these offers.
yeah, because there's also some wholesalers that will buy the property outright and then immediately sell it again. Um, would you say that's common or not as common as the traditional way of wholesaling?
I think like the housing market we've seen the last few years, it's been pretty common because there's been such low inventory, prices have been soaring. There's lots of buyers that's been more common than we've seen, like pre 2020 or, uh, but there's a huge, I mean, the ecosystem of real estate, and the relation between, the sellers, or potential sellers and the end buyers. I mean, there's all sorts of different strategies and concepts. And, I really believe that the best thing that a seller can do is work with a realtor. And I'm saying that from somebody that would love to buy your house if you called me up and asked me to make you an offer and there wasn't a realtor involved. But if you did that, I would still tell you the best thing to do is work with a realtor to sell your home.
Yeah, because the other thing too, I don't know how long it's been, but I know it's probably been, it's newer than, 10 years ago, but the co-wholesaling process and there being so many more wholesalers or it seems to be a lot of wholesalers compared to end buyers where, even the wholesaler may not even know that the person they're trying to sell the property to is another wholesaler. So now you've got someone who is also trying to find another buyer. And now you got this trickle down effect of who's going to find the buyer. And if the other person doesn't do it, it's just a waste of the seller's time. But then there's some who will work together where one person is finding the buyer and the other person is just looking for the people that want to sell, right? But going into that, can you discuss, some other frustrations the seller can expect when agreeing to sell their home with a wholesaler who's doing a simultaneous close and not, buying it outright and then selling it again?
Um, it's important to know who you're working with and just try to ask as many questions as possible because some of the guys that run these operations in Southeast Michigan, are good, have good operations, and they have a good network of cash buyers. But, just there's like a lot of steps in the process. Like one thing is a lot of these cash buyers are getting what's called private money loans or hard money loans. So that can sometimes cause delays because they're not really buying with cash. They're getting under contract with cash and then they're trying to scramble in some cases to figure out who's going to lend them the money so that they can close in, 6 days or something, so that sometimes can be challenging. So you have to be be flexible and kind of go along for the ride. And if you don't feel comfortable with the person that's quote unquote selling you, then it's probably time to ask more questions. Figure out how long they've been doing it for, how long they've been in business, get some, references or referrals and things like that. Like anything else, like going into business with anybody else in any other industry.
Yeah, you made a few good points because I think a lot of people who do this, they don't realize they're going into business or something. They think it's like, oh, they're buying my shoes, that's the end of it. But it really is a business relationship, even though it's not representation. But the other thing I wanted to mention too, oh, I think I lost it. Maybe it'll come back to me. But in the meantime, can you explain what a simultaneous close is?
Um, are you just talking about like when
Well, because
title
I think when I
company?
said that, most people don't know what that means. So, it's not traditional closing, right? So how does that work where a wholesaler is doing a simultaneous close, it's a double closing, it's a
Yeah, yeah, and some title companies try to try to stay away from that. I think some title companies are more like quote unquote investor friendly. Um, not that there's anything, unethical or shady about it. It's just that some of the title underwriters, the big underwriter companies, have policies and guidelines in place where they don't like to write that type of business. That's getting into the weeds a little bit, but it would just be where, like the buyer closed on, their private money loan and the transaction that they're purchasing, and that wholesaler assigns it to them all sort of at the same time. Is that what you're referring to?
yeah, yeah, like they're waiting for someone else to close before they're closing. Um,
Hmm.
Yeah, so I did think about what I was going to say. So, with the private money, yeah, like you made a good point. If they're writing you off for cash, they need 30 days to close, right? Okay, so why is it taking 30 days to close when you are paying cash? Because it should only take you about a week, given everything's good with the title and there's no inspection. Um, I think yeah, one of those things to keep in mind is that well, sometimes, the private money lenders, they won't even, consider the person until they actually have a deal in place. So, like you said, I mean, it can take time just trying to figure out who's going to give them money if they can get the money for the deal in the first place. Um, but I think a really important thing to people to keep in mind uh, with the wholesaling process is that you would have to consider that, the person may not ever find a buyer if the deal doesn't make sense for the end investor. And I've had some transactions where um, I explained to the seller, but they want to go with the deal, and they've given this person 2 months to close. That should have been a cash transaction and just waste a lot of time. And if you're a seller that really needs to sell the property at a certain timeline, that's not going to be the best thing for you. Um, and then some home sellers, if you don't, if you find out later they're wholesaling, they didn't really tell you that they're wholesaling, and you say you don't want to sell something more because you guys could have gotten more money, a lot of them will claim interest on the title, um, which could cause complications for you to go sell with someone else. So those are just two things I want to make sure people knew.
Yeah,
But
that's all kind of that's stuff that's not good for the industry or for the consumer. And I would like to think that that sort of thing doesn't happen too often, but I know that it does happen. Yeah, there's definitely some bad actors out there.
well, yeah, because if the wholesaler, really is doing their due diligence and, has a way of finding out what the property really would be worth once it's fixed up, they really should be going into it with it being a deal, and it shouldn't be difficult
Hmm.
to find an end buyer. But if they didn't do their homework, then that's probably where most of those issues come in. Um,
Yeah, and usually the way the contracts, again, it's important to read the contract, the offer thoroughly. Sometimes, usually they have it written where like an earnest money deposit is not really, it's either a small amount or it's not collectible, you know? If for some reason a few weeks went by and they're coming up against the expiration date and the seller's getting frustrated and they don't have a buyer yet, usually they're able to walk away from that contract pretty much unscathed. Because if you're a wholesaler, I mean, it's a little, unless you have a lot of capital to work with and you're prepared to purchase the property. But keep in mind, their goal is to get as many deals under contract at one time and do lots and lots of volume. So it's just risky if they were worried on every deal about possibly having to fork up like a $5,000 EMD or something.
oh yeah. Okay. Um, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So it's good to keep in mind that just because an investor is in position to purchase a home outright, there are plenty of investors who do wholesaling and they buy their own properties too. So in some instances, it can be difficult to interpret what they're really trying to do. I had one this year where we I the contract looked great, and so we closed, in a few days, no inspection, all cash. They bought it for exactly what the property was worth. And so when I had another property that was in a similar situation, I said, "Oh, well, let me go back to them." That went well. Things should be fine. And then when I received the purchase agreement, I'm seeing the verbiage in there where, okay, it looks like they're trying to wholesale it, and then they want to use
Hmm.
their title company. So that's another red flag. And so then we didn't go through with that because that was
Yeah, I think I remember talking with you about that one.
yeah. So, with investments one, um, you're not all of your deals would be where you're purchasing the property. The seller wouldn't have to worry about you potentially wholesaling any of the properties that you buy.
That's right. Yeah. Every offer that we make is a cash offer, and we would be the purchasing entity. Absolutely.
Okay. Um, I think we pretty much talked a lot about this, but is there any other red flags you'd want to add about a seller being aware of um, if a wholesaler isn't being honest with the seller that that's what they're trying to do, wholesale the property.
Oh, I think we covered it pretty well. Just ask questions, don't be overly trusting, and make sure before you sign any contract that you are comfortable with the other party involved.
Okay. So another thing so to keep in mind is the negotiation tactics or games that sometimes investors approach to get the best deal for themselves. Can you explain some of those?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the negotiating is just like any other form of negotiating where their initial offer is probably not going to be their highest offer. So to keep that in mind, and even if you were presented with a lowball offer, don't assume that if you countered it at a much higher price, that they wouldn't consider it. And the same thing can be said. I mean, this is even more reason to work with a realtor, somebody that's has a fiduciary responsibility to you and is very comfortable in that space of negotiating with buyers. Um, but yeah, it's like if you're putting an offer on something on Facebook Marketplace and you offer them $50, well, that's probably not the highest that you would go up to. So,
Okay. If a homeowner is looking to sell their home that is best suited for investments one, what is that process like?
so we're very flexible with closing date, and occupancy and terms. Basically, uh, we tailor the terms of the contract to fit the seller's needs, whether they want to close, in a week, or they want to close in a month, or they want to close in a month and have 30 days occupancy. Um, there's different ways to structure the offer, but typically the seller is only responsible for paying their traditional closing costs, which are your title fees and title insurance and paying transfer taxes. And we do have an inspection on every property that we look at. We try to schedule the inspection within a day, to 3 days of the time the offer was accepted. We try to make it a pretty stress-free process. And, we know the importance of the seller's situation and what they need as far as their timeline and everything. So we really try to make it a positive experience for the seller. And also if there's a referring realtor involved so that we can get more referrals. We don't really market much to the general public or the consumer. You're not going to see any advertising other than social media and our website, www.househop.com. So having a good reputation and doing the right thing and feeling confident that we'll continue to get referrals from our referral base so we can buy more properties and fit the needs for those sellers that need that.
Okay. And then also like if a seller uses a realtor like me, myself, um,
Mhm.
that's connected with investments one, the seller can get some form of representation from their realtor without paying a commission because obviously that person already had a relationship with the realtor. So, and the realtor's still getting paid, even though it's not a traditional transaction. At least they know they're going to review the purchase agreement with them and
Mhm.
answer questions. So it's kind of like a win-win if they want to get things done quickly, but don't uh, want to make sure everything's done how it should be done. Yeah. But that's true, right? Is that what you would say? It's like some form of
Yeah,
representation.
absolutely. Yeah. Most of the homes that we purchase, there is a realtor involved. And I might be biased, but I think that's a good thing. I think it's important that the seller has a fiduciary agent in their corner working for their best interest. Typically, when we make offers, we are not the only buyer making an offer on that property. Sometimes we're going up against several others, and sometimes we close on the sale, and sometimes we're, just like a few $1,000s off, and another buyer gets it. And I honestly think that's a good thing for everybody involved.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you want to add to this interview?
Do you guys have any questions about HouseHop? You can visit househop.com. Uh, if anybody listening is at all interested in real estate investing, either in Southeast Michigan or elsewhere, either if you've been doing it a little while or you're just getting started and you have any questions, um, I'm certainly happy to share my experience over the last 5, 6 years with you. And you can call me at 248-770 888-888-1917, or you can shoot me an email, which is my first and last name, Evan Elsea @realestateone.com. And I'd love to talk to you and share my experience with you, tell you what has worked and what hasn't worked, and hopefully it can be some benefit.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time, and I hope everyone enjoy this, and hope you have a good day.
Thanks, Patrice.
Thank you. Bye. If you've enjoyed watching this video and would love to stay up to date when I have more content like this or something similar that you may be interested in, please like and subscribe to this channel and click the bell so you get notifications. And I hope you have a great day.